"Please, don't lift my skirt," the alien girl begged, but the human did, and it broke him. Rain hammered against the metal roof of Garrett Hayes' modest homestead, creating a symphony of pings and thuds that usually lulled him to sleep. Not tonight. Something felt off. He'd spent 5 years on this backwater planet the locals called Tyranno, far from Earth's bustling colonies and the political mess of the Galactic Confederation. Here on the outskirts of the small settlement of Blue Ridge, populated mostly by the native Azuri, he'd found a semblance of peace. Garrett rolled out of bed, his muscular frame casting a long shadow in the dim light of his bedroom. Scars crisscrossed his tanned skin, reminders of battles he'd rather forget. At 36, he looked older, his face weathered by both the elements and the weight of his past. The military had taken everything from him, so he'd left it behind, choosing instead the simple life of a farmer and occasional mechanic. A flash of lightning illuminated the window, and that's when he saw them. Strange, elongated footprints in the mud, leading toward his old barn. They weren't Azuri prints. Those were whiter, with 3 distinct toe marks. These were something else. "Damn it," he muttered, grabbing his pulse rifle from beside the bed. He didn't bother with a shirt, just pulled on his work pants and boots before heading out into the downpour. The rain soaked him instantly as he trudged through the mud, following the tracks. The barn door was ajar, creaking slightly in the wind. Garrett approached cautiously, rifle raised, and nudged it open with his foot. "Anyone in here?" he called out, his deep voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I'm armed, so don't try anything stupid." A soft whimper came from the far corner, near the pile of straw he kept for the 2-horned beast that served as this planet's equivalent of cattle. Garrett moved closer, keeping his weapon ready. Huddled in the straw was a female Azuri, but different from any he'd seen before. Most Azuri had cobalt skin and dark hair, but hers was a pale, delicate blue, almost translucent in places, with long, silvery hair that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a startling violet, reflected both fear and something else. Shame? Her clothing, a light white skirt and metallic top typical of the Azuri, was torn and soiled with mud and what looked like blood. Bruises marked her slender arms and face. "You hurt?" Garrett asked, lowering his weapon but not setting it aside. She didn't respond, just pulled her knees tighter to her chest. "Look, I'm not going to harm you," he said, crouching down to her level. "But you're trespassing on my property, and I need to know if I should be expecting trouble to follow you here." Still nothing. Garrett sighed, reaching out a hand to help her stand. That's when she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, don't lift my skirt." The words hit Garrett like a physical blow. He'd heard that tone before, in war zones in the aftermath of atrocities. He didn't need details to understand what had happened to her. "I won't," he said softly, withdrawing his hand. "Can you tell me your name?" "Anira," she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't go back." "Back where?" "To the settlement?" She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "They'll cast me out. I'm defiled. 3 of them. They..." Her voice broke. Garrett felt a familiar rage building inside him. The Azuri had strict customs regarding female purity. A woman who had been violated was considered tainted, unable to bear children for her tribe. It was an archaic, cruel practice, but it was their way. "You can stay here tonight," he said, making a quick decision he'd probably regret. "Tomorrow we'll figure something out." Relief flooded her features, but it was short-lived. "The elders will come looking. They'll punish you for harboring me." "Let them try," Garrett replied, his jaw set in a determination. He dealt with worse than some self-important alien bureaucrats. He helped her stand, careful not to touch her more than necessary, and led her toward the house. As they stepped out into the rain, a distant rumble that wasn't thunder caught his attention. Lights appeared on the horizon, moving fast. Transport vehicles. "Looks like tomorrow came early," Garrett muttered, ushering Anira toward the house. "Get inside, quick." As they reached the porch, Anira stumbled, clutching her abdomen in pain. Garrett caught her before she fell, noticing for the first time the extent of her injuries. This wasn't just about cultural taboos. She needed medical attention. Change of plans, he said, scooping her up as gently as possible. We're getting you to my med station first. As he carried her inside, Anira's eyes met his, a mixture of gratitude and fear in their violet depths. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Garrett didn't answer immediately. How could he explain that in her suffering, he saw echoes of all the innocent victims he'd failed to save during the war? Or that after years of running from his past, maybe he was finally ready to stop running? Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply, and because sometimes that's all we've got left. The approaching vehicles grew louder as Garrett closed and locked the door behind them, knowing full well that his quiet life on Terreno had just come to an end. Garrett laid Anira on the examination table in his small medical alcove, a relic from his military days when field medicine had been part of his training. The approaching vehicles were close now, their engines growling like predators in the night. This might hurt, he warned, activating his portable med scanner. The blue light swept over Anira's body, displaying her injuries on the small screen. Internal bleeding, tissue damage, several cracked ribs. Worse than he'd thought. How bad? She asked, her voice barely audible over the rain and approaching engines. Nothing I can't handle, Garrett lied, reaching for a vial of synthetic plasma in a tissue regenerator. But we need to work fast. As he administered the plasma, Anira's eyes widened with fear. They're coming for me. The sons of Elder Krell. They're the ones who... She couldn't finish the sentence. The Elder's sons? Garrett's jaw tightened. No wonder she couldn't go back. The Azuri hierarchy was rigid. The elders and their families were untouchable. Any accusation against them would be dismissed, the accuser punished instead. They said no one would believe me. That I was just a genetic aberration anyway. Tears slid down her cheeks. My coloring, it's rare among my people. Some think it's beautiful, others see it as a defect. Garrett had heard rumors about the Azuri's genetic prejudices, but had dismissed them as exaggeration. Now looking at Anira's unusual coloring, he understood. She had been vulnerable even before the attack. The vehicle stopped outside, door slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. Stay here, Garrett said, handing her a small neural disruptor. If anyone but me comes through that door, use this. It won't kill them, but it'll drop them long enough for you to run. He moved to the front of the house, grabbing his pulse rifle again. Through the window, he could see 3 Azuri males, all with the distinctive facial markings of the elder families, and 2 armed guards. The leader, a tall Azuri with a scar across his right cheek, pounded on the door. Human, we know you're harboring a fugitive. Open up by order of the Azuri Council. Garrett took a deep breath, then opened the door just enough to show his face and the barrel of his rifle. It's the middle of the night, and I don't take orders from your council. State your business or get off my property. The leader's eyes narrowed. I am Torin, son of Elder Krell. A criminal has fled justice, and her tracks lead to your dwelling. Hand her over immediately. Criminal? What's her crime? Garrett kept his voice level, but his finger hovered near the trigger. She attacked 3 respected citizens and stole valuable property, Turan said smoothly. She's dangerous and mentally unstable. Garrett almost laughed at the absurdity of the lie. Anira, barely able to walk, had supposedly overpowered 3 Azuri males and robbed them? I haven't seen anyone. Feel free to check the barn if you don't believe me. We'll search your house as well, Torin insisted, trying to push past Garrett. Garrett blocked him with a rifle. You need a warrant for that, signed by both your council and a human colonial administrator. Or have the Azuri suddenly decided to ignore the Treaty of Settlement? Torin's face contorted with rage. You dare cite our laws to me, human? We know she's here. The penalty for interfering with Azuri justice is severe. So is the penalty for violating a human citizen's property rights, Garrett countered. I've got nothing to hide, but I won't be bullied in my own home. Get a warrant or get lost. One of the guards stepped forward, hand on his weapon. Perhaps we should teach this human some respect, Lord Toran. Torin held up a hand. No, not yet. He fixed Garrett with a cold stare. Very well, human. We'll return with your precious warrant. But know this, the female is property of the Azuri Council. Harboring her is an act of theft against our people. Property? Garrett's voice dropped dangerously low. I thought slavery was outlawed in Confederation space. Not slavery. She is a ward of the Council due to her unique genetic makeup. For her own protection, of course. Turan's smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll return at dawn. I suggest you reconsider your position before then. They retreated to their vehicles, engines roaring as they sped away. Garrett waited until they were out of sight before securing the door and returning to Anira. She was sitting up now, the neural disruptor clutched in her trembling hands. You should have given me to them, she whispered. They'll destroy you for helping me. They can try, Garrett replied, checking her vitals on the scanner. The synthetic plasma was working. Her readings were stabilizing. I've dealt with bullies before, alien or otherwise. You don't understand. Turan and his brothers, they're not just elder sons. They're part of the genetic purity movement. They believe variants like me should be eliminated from the Azuri bloodline. Her voice shook with fear and anger. What they did to me wasn't just violence. It was a message, a warning to others like me. Garrett's stomach turned. He'd seen this kind of hatred before, on a dozen worlds. Different species, same old story. They said you were council property because of your genetics. What did they mean? Inara looked away. The council has been collecting variants, studying us. They say it's to understand our abilities, but really they're trying to control us. She hesitated. Some variants can do things, special things. Like what? Instead of answering, she reached toward a medical instrument on the table beside her. It floated up, hovering for a moment before settling back down. Telekinesis, Garrett breathed. That's rare. And valuable, Anira added bitterly. Too valuable to waste on a female who can't bear children anymore. The implications hit Garrett like a physical blow. They hadn't just attacked her, they deliberately injured her in a way that would render her infertile by Azuri standards, knowing it would strip her of protection under tribal law. Dawn's in 4 hours, he said, making a quick decision. Can you travel? Anira nodded cautiously. Where would we go? I've got a friend in the mining colony on the other side of the ridge. Human settlement, Confederation jurisdiction. Turan's warrant won't mean shit there. Garrett began gathering supplies. We'll need to move fast, though. I don't think they're waiting until dawn. As if on cue, a distant rumble echoed through the night. More vehicles, and from the sound of it, heavier ones. They're bringing enforcers, Anira said, fear evident in her voice. Garrett helped her to her feet. Then we'd better not be here when they arrive. We can't take the main road, Garrett said, helping Anira into a weatherproof jacket that hung comically large on her slender frame. They'll have it watched. He moved efficiently around the small house, gathering supplies. Medkit, water purifier, emergency rations, portable shield generator. Old habits from his military days resurfaced with practiced ease. Can you walk? He asked, eyeing her cautiously. Anira took a tentative step, wincing but remaining upright. I'll manage. Not good enough. Garrett knelt before her, back facing her. Climb on. We need to move fast. She hesitated, then carefully wrapped her arms around his neck. He stood, supporting her legs with his arms, careful to avoid her injuries. The regenerator helped, but you need proper medical attention, he said as they slipped out the back door into the rain. My friend Ian runs the medical facility at New Haven. He's a good man. Why are you doing this? Anira asked, her breath warm against his ear. You could lose everything. Garrett trudged through the mud toward the dense forest behind his property. Not much to lose, honestly, and some things are worth fighting for. The distant rumble of vehicles grew louder as they entered the tree line. Garrett activated his night vision implant, another military relic, and navigated through the underbrush with surprising agility despite his burden. They're at the house, Anira whispered, her telekinetic senses apparently extending beyond normal perception. A moment later, the night lit up as his homestead erupted in flames. Garrett stopped, watching his 5 years of peaceful existence burn away. I'm sorry, Anira said softly. Don't be. It's just stuff. He resumed walking, faster now. The ridge is about 6 kilometers through this forest. There's an old mining trail that leads directly to New Haven. If we push hard, We can make it by morning." The rain eventually stopped, but the forest floor remained treacherously slick. Twice Garrett nearly lost his footing on steep inclines. Each time he felt an invisible force steadying him, and Naira's telekinesis subtly at work. "That's handy," he remarked after the second save. "It's weak," she replied apologetically. "I was never properly trained." The Council only allows sanctioned variants to develop their abilities. And the unsanctioned ones? Suppression drugs, or worse. They fell silent as they navigated a particularly dense section of forest. In the distance, searchlights swept through the trees. The Azuri enforcers had begun combing the area. "They're using thermal scanners," Anira warned. "They'll find us soon." Garrett nodded, changing direction. "There's a stream ahead. Water will mask our heat signatures temporarily." They reached the stream, more of a rushing river after the heavy rainfall, and Garrett waded in carefully, still carrying Anira. "Hold tight," he instructed as the cold water rose to his waist. The current was strong, threatening to sweep them away, but he fought against it, moving diagonally across. Halfway across, a spotlight caught them. Shouts echoed through the forest. "There! In the water!" The crack of energy weapons split the night. Blue bolts sizzled into the water around them. "Hold your breath," Garrett commanded, then plunged them both beneath the surface. The frigid water was a shock to his system, but he kicked powerfully, propelling them downstream underwater. Energy bolts created strange, distorted light patterns above them as they traveled with the current. When his lungs burned for air, Garrett surfaced behind a fallen tree that partially dammed the stream. He gasped, pulling Anira up beside him. "You okay?" he asked between breaths. She nodded, though her lips had taken on a purplish tint from cold and oxygen deprivation. More shouts came from upstream. The enforcers were following the bank, still searching. "We need a distraction," Garrett muttered. Anira's eyes narrowed in concentration. Upstream, a massive tree branch suddenly cracked and fell, splashing heavily into the water. The enforcers immediately redirected their attention toward the noise. "Nice," Garrett whispered, impressed. "Can you do more?" "Not much," she admitted, clearly exhausted by the effort, "but enough to buy us time." They continued downstream until finding a suitable exit point, then climbed the muddy bank and resumed their journey through the forest. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as they put distance between themselves and the enforcers. By dawn, they reached the ridge overlooking New Haven mining colony. The settlement was an impressive sight, a sprawling complex of prefabricated buildings, processing facilities, and residential domes, all protected by a perimeter shield that shimmered faintly in the morning light. "We made it," Anira breathed, relief evident in her voice. "Not quite yet," Garrett cautioned, pointing to the colony's main gate where several Azuri enforcement vehicles were parked. "Looks like they called ahead." "They can't enter without permission, can they?" "No, but they can stop anyone from entering, including us." Garrett set Anira down gently on a boulder, allowing her to rest while he surveyed the situation. "We need another way in." "What about calling your friend?" Anira suggested. Garrett shook his head. "Communications will be monitored. We need to—" He stopped mid-sentence as a familiar figure emerged from the colony gate, arguing heatedly with the Azuri enforcers. "Is that your friend?" Anira asked, following his gaze. "No," Garrett replied, a rare smile crossing his face. "That's Colonel Diana Powers, Colonial Administrator of New Haven. And if I'm not mistaken, she's telling those enforcers exactly where they can stick their demands." Even from this distance, the colonel's body language was unmistakable. Spine straight as a rod, finger jabbing at the chest of the lead enforcer, voice carrying faintly on the morning breeze with phrases like Confederation sovereignty and diplomatic incident. "You know her," Anira asked. "We served together." 3 tours on the frontier, Garrett's expression grew thoughtful. "She's a good person." "Fair. If anyone will hear us out, it's her. But how do we reach her with those enforcers blocking the gate?" Garrett's smile widened into something almost predatory. "We don't have to. She's coming to us." Sure enough, after dismissing the enforcers with what appeared to be a final warning, Colonel Powers climbed into a small transport vehicle and headed directly toward the ridge where they were hiding. How did she know? Anira wondered. Garrett tapped his left forearm where an old scar formed a distinctive pattern. Subcutaneous beacon. Standard issue for our unit. Only activates in specific circumstances, like when my house burned down. She must have picked up the signal. The transport vehicle stopped at the base of the ridge, and Colonel Powers stepped out, scanning the tree line. She was a tall, imposing woman with close-cropped gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had seen her share of conflicts. "Hayes!" she called out. "I know you're up there. Get your ass down here before those blue bastards come back with reinforcements." You look like hell, Hayes," Colonel Diana Powers remarked as she examined Anira's injuries in the colony's medical facility. 5 years of playing farmer, and you still find trouble." "Trouble found me," Garrett replied, leaning against the wall as Dr. Ian Craig, the colony's chief medical officer, ran advanced diagnostics on Anira. "It always does with you." Diana's stern expression softened slightly. "Your house? Ash! Damn shame." She handed him a steaming cup of coffee. So want to tell me why the Azuri Enforcement Division is demanding I hand over your blue friend here?" "They're calling her a dangerous fugitive." Garrett gave her the condensed version: Anira's assault, the genetic variant persecution, Torrens' threats. Diana listened without interruption, her face growing harder with each detail. "Genetic variants, huh?" She glanced at Anira, who was now sedated while Dr. Craig worked. "That explains why Elder Krell himself is on his way here with a diplomatic delegation. They're claiming she's carrying classified Azuri genetic technology." "She's not carrying it, she is it," Garrett corrected, "and they've been systematically abusing people like her." Diana rubbed her temples. "Hayes, you know I can't just what? Protect an innocent victim from her rapists?" Garrett's voice rose sharply. "Lower your voice," Diana commanded, military authority returning to her tone. "I'm not saying we'll hand her over. But this is a delicate situation. New Haven exists on Azuri territory through a mining treaty. One wrong move and they could revoke it, leaving 3,000 colonists stranded." Dr. Craig approached, interrupting their tense exchange. "Colonel, Mr. Hayes, you should see this." He led them to a holographic display showing Anira's genetic scan. Her DNA structure is remarkable. The telekinetic abilities Mr. Hayes described are just the surface. Her cellular regeneration rate is triple the Azuri norm, and there are markers here. He pointed to a complex molecular chain that suggests potential for other psionic abilities. "Is that why they want her back so badly?" Diana asked. "Possibly, but there's more." Dr. Craig's expression darkened. The internal damage she sustained wasn't random. It was precisely targeted to destroy her reproductive organs while leaving everything else intact. This was methodical, calculated. Garrett's fist clenched. They wanted to ensure she couldn't pass on her genes, while keeping her alive for study, Craig added grimly. "Barbaric." Diana paced the room, military mind working through scenarios. "Elder Krell arrives in 6 hours. I can stall the diplomatic meeting for another day, maybe 2, citing colony protocols. That gives us time to..." An alarm blared through the facility, cutting her off. Diana rushed to the nearest console. "Perimeter breach in Sector 7, reported a security officer over the comm. "Multiple hostiles using stealth tech. They've already disabled 2 guard posts." "So much for diplomacy," Diana muttered. "Hayes, get Anira somewhere secure. Craig, initiate medical lockdown. I'm heading to command." "They're not waiting for Elder Krell," Garrett observed, already moving toward Anira. "Of course not. The diplomatic visit is just cover for the extraction team." Diana checked her sidearm. "Torren doesn't want witnesses when he reclaims his property." As Diana departed, Dr. Craig helped Garrett move the still sedated Anira to a secure isolation room deep within the medical facility. "The regenerative treatment is working, but she needs at least 12 hours of uninterrupted healing," Craig explained, activating the room's security protocols. "Wake her only if absolutely necessary." Left alone with Anira, Garrett took up position by the door, pulse rifle ready. Through the small window, he could see medical staff rushing to secure patients as the facility went into lockdown. His comm unit buzzed. "Diana, Hayes, we've got 8, maybe 10 infiltrators using advanced cloaking tech. They've disabled our internal sensors in the East Wing and are moving your way. Security teams are responding, but they're outmatched. What about the colony shield? Still up, but they were already inside. Must have slipped in with the morning supply convoy. These aren't regular enforcers, Hayes. They're Azuri Special Operations. Garrett's blood ran cold. He'd faced Azuri Spec Ops during the border conflicts, and elite warriors with enhanced reflexes and specialized training. Can you seal off the medical section? Working on it. But Hayes, Diana's voice dropped. If they take her, we both know what happens next. They won't take her, Garrett promised, ending the transmission. He quickly assessed the room. One door, no windows, minimal cover. A defensible position, but also a potential trap. If the Azuri breached the door, there would be nowhere to run. Anira stirred on the medical bed, violet eyes fluttering open. Garrett, she murmured, still groggy from sedation. Hey there, he said softly, moving to her side. How are you feeling? Better. She tried to sit up, wincing slightly. Something's wrong. I can sense hostility. Many minds, focused, hunting. Torrin sent an extraction team. They're in the colony, heading this way. Fear flashed across her face, but it quickly hardened into determination. Help me up. I won't be taken lying down. Dr. Craig says you need rest. Dr. Craig isn't the one they want to dissect, she countered, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. Her hospital gown slipped slightly, revealing the delicate blue skin of her shoulder. Despite the situation, Garrett found himself momentarily distracted by the sight. Anira caught his gaze, and surprisingly, a faint smile touched her lips. You humans are strange. Even in danger, you find time to appreciate beauty. Garrett felt heat rise to his face. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. She stood carefully, testing her balance. It's nice to be seen as something other than a specimen or a defect. The moment was interrupted by a muffled explosion somewhere in the facility, followed by alarms and the distant sound of energy weapons. They're getting closer, Anira said, her expression grim. I can help fight. My abilities are still recovering like you, Garrett finished, guiding her back to sitting on the edge of the bed. Save your strength. We may need it for a last resort. His comm unit buzzed again. Hayes, Diana's voice was tight with tension. They've breached the medical wing. Security is engaged, but they're taking heavy casualties. These Azuri have military-grade weapons. Definitely not standard enforcer equipment. Options? I'm sending a team to extract you through the maintenance tunnels. Hold your position for 10 minutes. The comm went silent. Garrett turned to Anira, who was watching him with those unnervingly perceptive violet eyes. They won't make it in time, she said quietly. I can sense the Azuri. They're too close. Garrett checked his rifle's charge. 80%, enough for a sustained firefight, but not against multiple spec ops with superior position. Then we change the game, he decided, moving to the room's environmental controls. If we can't outfight them, we'll outthink them. He began adjusting settings, lowering the temperature and increasing humidity. Anira watched curiously. What are you doing? Azuri thermal vision works poorly in cold, humid conditions, Garrett explained, and their motion sensors can be fooled by rapid temperature changes. Understanding dawned on her face. You've fought them before? 3 tours on the border worlds. You pick up a few tricks. He finished the adjustments and returned to her side. Now we wait. And when they come, we surprise them, Anira finished, a new respect in her eyes. She reached out, her slender blue fingers brushing against his scarred hand. Thank you, Garrett. No matter what happens, thank you for seeing me as a person worth saving. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through him, contrasting sharply with the rapidly cooling room. For a brief moment, the danger receded, and all he could focus on was the connection between them, fragile yet somehow profound. Then the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness, and the battle for their survival began. In the pitch-black room, Garrett relied on other senses. The soft sound of Anira's breathing beside him, the faint hum of medical equipment, the subtle vibration of approaching footsteps through the floor. He positioned himself between the door and Anira, pulse rifle raised. They're coming, Anira whispered, her voice steady, despite the fear he knew she must be feeling. 4 of them, moving slowly. Can you sense what they are planning? They're confused. The temperature change is working. Their thermal imaging is compromised. A soft click came from the door, the electronic lock being bypassed. Garrett tensed, finger on the trigger. When I give the signal, he breathed, use whatever telekinetic strength you have to push everything in the room toward the door. Can you do that? I think so. The door slid open a crack, revealing a sliver of equally dark corridor. A specialized probe, a thin, snake-like device with a sensor array at its tip, slithered into the room. Now, Garrett hissed. Inara's telekinetic wave wasn't powerful, but in the confined space, it was enough. Medical equipment, chairs, and instruments flew toward the door as Garrett opened fire. The probe shattered, and he heard satisfying grunts of pain as the debris struck the Azuri operatives. Taking advantage of the confusion, Garrett surged forward, firing controlled bursts into the darkness. His night vision implant gave him a crucial edge. He could see the Azuri's shimmer suits, advanced camouflage technology that bent light around the wearer. 2 operatives went down immediately, caught off guard by the human who could apparently see through their stealth tech. The third managed to return fire, forcing Garrett to dive behind an overturned medical cabinet. The fourth Azuri, more cautious than his comrades, had held back. Now he tossed something into the room, a neural disruptor grenade. Garrett recognized the distinctive whine as it armed. "Cover your ears and close your eyes," he shouted to Inara, doing the same himself. The grenade detonated with a high-pitched shriek and a flash that penetrated even closed eyelids. Designed to overwhelm sensory organs, it would incapacitate most beings for several minutes. But Garrett had encountered these weapons before. He'd built up a partial resistance during his military training. While disoriented, he wasn't helpless. He fired blindly toward where he'd last seen the fourth operative, then staggered to Inara, who was clutching her head in pain. "Can you move?" he asked, his own voice sounding distant through the ringing in his ears. Before she could answer, a fifth Azuri, one Inara hadn't sensed, materialized from the shadows behind them. This one wore no shimmer suit, but instead the distinctive armor of an Azuri commander. He grabbed Inara by her hospital gown, yanking her away from Garrett. "Enough games," the commander snarled, pressing a blade against Inara's throat. "Drop your weapon, human, or I'll finish what my subordinates started with this abomination." Garrett hesitated, his rifle still raised. The neural grenade's effects were fading, his vision clearing enough to recognize the commander's face. Toran himself had joined the extraction team. "Let her go, Toran," Garrett said, keeping his voice level. "Your operation's blown. The whole colony knows you're here. All the more reason to conclude our business quickly." Toran's blade pressed deeper, drawing a thin line of silvery blood from Inara's neck. "The specimen comes with me, or dies here. Your choice." Inara's eyes met Garrett's, and in them he saw not fear, but a fierce determination. She gave him the slightest nod. Understanding her intent, Garrett slowly lowered his weapon, then suddenly dropped to the floor as Inara unleashed her telekinesis with unprecedented force. Medical equipment, debris, and even the bodies of fallen Azuri operatives flew across the room in a chaotic whirlwind. Toran, caught by surprise, lost his grip on Inara. She twisted away, the blade slicing her hospital gown, but missing her flesh. Garrett seized the opportunity, raising his rifle and firing at Toran's legs, avoiding lethal shots. The Azuri commander howled in pain as energy bolts seared through his knee joints. He collapsed, still clutching his blade. "Surrender, Toran," Garrett demanded, standing over him. "It's over." "Never," Toran spat, his face contorted with hatred. With surprising speed, he lunged at Inara, blade aimed at her abdomen. Garrett reacted instinctively, throwing himself between them. The blade sliced across his chest, cutting deep. He grunted in pain, but managed to knock Toran back with the butt of his rifle. Before either could make another move, the room flooded with light and armed figures poured through the doorway. Colonel Powers and her security team had arrived. "Secure the prisoner," Diana ordered as her team subdued the wounded Toran. She rushed to Garrett, who had slumped against the wall, blood seeping through his shirt. "Medic! We need a medic here!" Inara knelt beside Garrett, her hands pressing against his wound. "You idiot!" she whispered, tears in her violet eyes. "Why did you do that?" "Old habits," he managed through gritted teeth. "Can't seem to stop playing the hero." Dr. Craig arrived with a trauma team, quickly assessing the wound. It's deep, but missed the vital organs. He'll need surgery, but he'll live. As the medical team prepared to move him, Garrett grabbed Anira's hand. Are you okay? She nodded, a mixture of emotions playing across her face. Concern, gratitude, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. Thanks to you. Touching, Diana interrupted, her expression grim. But we've got bigger problems. Elder Krell's shuttle just entered orbit. He's demanding an immediate audience, and he's brought a Confederation diplomat with him. Perfect timing, Garrett muttered as the medics lifted him onto a stretcher. There's more, Diana continued, lowering her voice. The Confederation representative is Admiral Harrington. Garrett's face paled, and not from blood loss. Victor Harrington, my former commanding officer. The same, and he doesn't look happy to be here. Diana glanced at Anira. Whatever game the Azuri are playing, they've managed to drag high-level Confederation officials into it. This just became much more complicated. As they wheeled Garrett towards surgery, Anira walked alongside, still holding his hand. Who is this Admiral Harrington? She asked quietly. The man who discharged me from service, Garrett replied, his voice weak but bitter. Said I was too reckless, too prone to disobeying orders when civilian lives were at stake. So, a man who punished you for having a conscience? A pained smile crossed Garrett's face. I like your interpretation better than mine. Before they reached the surgical suite, Diana pulled Anira aside. We need to talk strategy. Elder Krell will demand your return, and with a Confederation diplomat backing him, my options are limited. I won't go back, Anira said firmly. I'd rather die. Nobody's dying today, Diana assured her. But we need leverage, something to make Krell back down. Anira's violet eyes hardened with resolve. Then it's time I told you everything I know about the genetic purity movement, including what Elder Krell's own genetic tests revealed about his family line. He's not as pure as he pretends to be, and I have proof. Diana's eyebrows rose. Blackmail? That's a dangerous game. So is hunting people for their DNA, Anira countered, and I'm tired of being prey. As Garrett was taken into surgery, the two women headed toward Diana's office to prepare for the diplomatic confrontation that would determine not just Anira's fate, but potentially the future of human-Azuri relations on Toronto. The New Haven colony's diplomatic chamber was designed to impress. Polished stone walls embedded with glowing mineral veins, a massive circular table crafted from native hardwood, and a panoramic view of the mining operation that was the settlement's reason for existence. Today, however, the room's grandeur was overshadowed by the tension filling it. Elder Krell sat rigidly on one side, his cobalt skin darker than most Zuri, marked with the elaborate facial patterns denoting his high status. Despite his advanced age, he carried himself with military precision. Beside him sat Admiral Victor Harrington, a stern-faced human with silver hair and the impeccable uniform of a Confederation flag officer. Across from them, Colonel Diana Powers maintained a composed expression that betrayed none of her inner anxiety. Anira sat beside her, now dressed in a simple colony jumpsuit, her unusual coloring and silver hair drawing subtle but constant glances from both Elder Krell and the Admiral. This unauthorized military action against a Confederation colony is an act of war, Elder Krell, Diana stated, opening the proceedings with characteristic directness. Your son led an armed incursion that resulted in the deaths of 3 of my security personnel and injuries to 7 others. A regrettable misunderstanding, Krell replied smoothly. My son acted without my knowledge or authorization, pursuing what he believed was a dangerous fugitive. He will face appropriate discipline upon our return to Azuri territory. A fugitive? Diana's voice dripped with skepticism. Or a victim seeking asylum from systematic abuse? Admiral Harrington cleared his throat. Colonel Powers, while I understand your concern for this individual, there are larger diplomatic considerations at play. The Azuri Council has filed formal papers claiming this female as a ward of their government. She has a name, came a voice from the doorway. It's Anira. All heads turned to see Garrett Hayes leaning against the doorframe, his chest bandaged beneath a hastily donned shirt. Dr. Craig hovered anxiously behind him, clearly disapproving of his patient's mobility. Hayes, Harrington's expression darkened. Still ignoring medical advice, I see. Some things never change? And some things do, Garrett replied, making his way slowly to the table. He nodded to Diana, who shifted to make room for him beside Anira. Like my tolerance for bureaucratic bullshit when lives are at stake. You were always crude, Hayes, Harrington remarked coldly. And you were always more concerned with politics than people. Garrett turned to Elder Krell. Your son and his brothers attacked Anira because she's a genetic variant. They deliberately rendered her infertile to strip her of protection under your laws, then hunted her when she escaped. Those aren't the actions of law enforcement. They're the actions of predators. Krell's face remained impassive. Serious accusations require serious evidence. We have it, Diana interjected, activating the room's holographic display. Medical scans showing the precise, targeted nature of Anira's injuries. Security footage from the colony showing Toran's unauthorized military operation. And she glanced at Anira, who gave a slight nod. Genetic data that might interest you personally, Elder Krell. The holographic display shifted to show a complex DNA sequence. Dr. Craig stepped forward, apparently having decided to join this impromptu conference despite his medical concerns. This is Anira's genetic profile, he explained, highlighting specific sequences. These markers indicate her variant abilities. And this, the display split to show a second DNA sequence, is the genetic profile we recovered from your son Toran during his medical treatment after capture. Krell leaned forward, his composure slipping for the first time. What is the meaning of this? The meaning, Craig continued, is that Toran carries recessive variant markers himself. Dormant but present, and according to our analysis, they could only have come from one source. He looked directly at Krell. You? The room fell silent. Krell's hands trembled slightly before he clasped them together. Impossible, he whispered, but the certainty had vanished from his voice. The genetic purity movement is built on a lie, Anir said softly, speaking for the first time. Many of the elders who most vehemently persecute variants carry the genes themselves. They fear what they might become, what their children might become. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. This is an internal Azuri matter. No, Garrett interrupted firmly. It stopped being internal when they brought their persecution onto Confederation soil, when they attacked a Confederation colony, when they injured Confederation citizens. Diana seized the moment. Elder Krell, you face a choice. Continue supporting your son's crimes and the genetic purity movement's hypocrisy. You're triggering a diplomatic incident that will expose your genetic truth to your people or help us forge a new understanding. Krell's eyes darted between the humans and Anira, calculations clearly running behind his aged features. What understanding do you propose? Asylum for Anira and any genetic variant who seeks it, Diana stated, a formal investigation into the abuses perpetrated by the purity movement, and a commitment to reform how variants are treated in Azuri society? Impossible, Krell scoffed, though with less conviction. Your traditions are killing innocent people, Garrett cut in. People like Anira, whose only crime was being born different. People like your own descendants might be, if your recessive genes express in future generations. Anira reached across the table, a bold move that caused Krell to flinch. Elder, I've seen the Council's secret records. I know that variant abilities saved our species during the Great Drought 3 centuries ago. Our differences aren't a weakness to be purged. They're an evolutionary advantage, a gift to help our people survive. Krell stared at her outstretched hand, conflict evident on his face. The Confederation values diversity, Harrington said unexpectedly, his tone softening. It's our strength. Perhaps the Azuri could learn from this. Garrett shot his former commander a surprised look. Harrington shrugged slightly. Even old military dogs can learn new tricks, Hayes. A long silence followed as Elder Krell visibly struggled with decades of ingrained beliefs. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. I will need guarantees, he said carefully, assurances that this transition will be managed, that chaos will not ensue. Of course, Diana agreed. "We can establish a joint Human-Azuri commission to oversee reforms and protect all parties' interests." "And Toran?" Krell asked, a father's concern briefly overriding the politician's calculation. "We'll face justice," Garrett stated firmly, "but with due process and proper representation. No summary executions, no disappearances. That's the human way." Krell nodded slowly. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human way. He turned to Enira. "I cannot undo what was done to you, but I can ensure it never happens to another." As the details of the agreement began to take shape, Garrett felt Enira's hand slip into his beneath the table. Her touch was cool against his skin, but it kindled a warmth that spread through his chest. "You should be resting," she whispered as the others became engrossed in diplomatic particulars. "Couldn't let you face this alone," he replied softly. Her violet eyes studied his face with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You've done more than enough, Garrett Hayes. You've already broken yourself for me once." He smiled, remembering their first meeting, her plea not to lift her skirt, a moment that seemed both yesterday and a lifetime ago. "Some things are worth breaking for," he murmured, "and some broken things can be rebuilt stronger than before." The double meaning wasn't lost on her. A faint smile touched her lips as she squeezed his hand. "Perhaps we can rebuild together." As the diplomatic talks continued around them, Garrett realized that for the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. 6 months had transformed the abandoned mining outpost on the outskirts of New Haven into something remarkable. What had once been a collection of dilapidated structures was now Haven's Edge, a sanctuary for Azuri variants fleeing persecution. Solar panels glinted on reinforced rooftops, gardens flourished in carefully tended plots, and the sounds of conversation and laughter drifted through the settlement. Garrett surveyed it all from the porch of the main building, a mug of coffee warming his hands against the morning chill. The scar across his chest from Toran's blade had healed into a pale lean, joining the collection of marks that mapped his history on his skin. "Thinking deep thoughts again?" Enira's voice came from behind him as she stepped onto the porch, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "Just appreciating the view," he replied, smiling as she moved beside him. "New arrivals settling in okay?" "The Naren family?" "Yes. The children were amazed when I showed them they didn't need to hide their abilities here." She leaned against the railing, her shoulder brushing his. "The youngest girl can manipulate plant growth. She's already helping in the gardens." In the months since the confrontation with Elder Krell, 27 Azuri variants had found their way to Haven's Edge. Each arrival reinforced what Garrett and Enira had created together. Not just a sanctuary, but a community where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Their relationship had evolved too, growing from cautious friendship to something deeper. The woman who had once trembled at his touch now sought it out, her initial fear replaced by a trust that humbled him daily. They shared living quarters, and the meals, responsibilities, and for the past 2 months, a bed. The first time had been tentative, both of them carrying their own scars. Enira had been afraid her injuries would make intimacy impossible, while Garrett had feared causing her more pain. But they'd discovered, with patience and tenderness, that healing was possible in more ways than one. Their physical differences, her cooler skin temperature, the subtle luminescence she emitted when aroused, had become sources of fascination rather than barriers. "Colonel Powers sent a message," Enira said, interrupting his thoughts. "The Joint Commission is making progress. 3 more settlements have repealed their variant restrictions. Diana's good at applying pressure where it's needed," Garrett acknowledged, "and Admiral Harrington's support has been unexpected but welcome." "Humans surprise me constantly," Enira mused, a playful smile touching her lips. "Especially you." He was about to respond when the perimeter alarm sounded, a short, pulsing tone indicating an approaching vehicle. Garrett's hand instinctively moved to the pulse pistol at his hip. "We're not expecting supplies today," he said, scanning the horizon. Enira closed her eyes briefly, extending her now stronger telekinetic senses. "A single occupant, Azuri male. His mind feels focused, determined." They moved quickly to the security station, where the monitor showed a small transport approaching the main gate. As it drew closer, the driver's face became visible. "Toran?" Garrett breathed, disbelief and anger mingling in his voice. "Impossible," Inra whispered. "He's supposed to be in custody awaiting trial." "Alert everyone," Garrett ordered the security officer on duty. "Lockdown protocol. Get the children to the shelter." As the sanctuary's alarm system activated, Garrett and Anira hurried to the main gate. By the time they arrived, Toran's transport had stopped outside the perimeter fence. He sat motionless behind the controls, making no attempt to breach the barrier. "What's he waiting for?" Anira wondered, her body tense beside Garrett's. "I don't know, but I don't like it." Garrett activated the external comm system. "Toran, step out of the vehicle with your hands visible." To their surprise, Toran complied immediately. He exited slowly, hands raised. He looked different, thinner, his once proud posture now hunched. The facial markings denoting his elder family status had been removed, leaving faint scars in their place. "I am unarmed," he called out, his voice lacking its former arrogance. I seek asylum." Garrett and Anira exchanged incredulous glances. "It's a trick," Garrett said firmly. "He's here for revenge." "Maybe," Anira conceded, "but something's different about him. His mind feels chaotic. Frightened." "Frightened?" "Toran," Garrett scoffed. "The man who hunted you. Who tried to kill us both." Anira studied the Azuri male carefully. "Let me speak with him." "From behind the barrier?" "Absolutely not." "Garrett." She placed a hand on his arm. "Trust me, I'll be safe." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded reluctantly. "First sign of trouble, we stun him and call Colonial Security." Inra approached the fence, while Garrett kept his weapon trained on Toran. Through the barrier, she addressed her former tormentor. "Why are you here? How did you escape custody?" Toran's eyes, once cold with hatred, now darted nervously. "I didn't escape. I was released on my father's authority for medical treatment." "Medical treatment?" In answer, Toran slowly extended his hand. A small rock near his feet trembled, then rose shakily into the air. Anira gasped. "Your variant genes, they've activated." 3 weeks ago, Toran confirmed, letting the rock drop. "The irony is not lost on me. The very thing I persecuted others for now manifests in me." His voice broke. "My brothers have disowned me. The movement I once led now hunts me." "So you came to the very people you tried to destroy," Garrett said, moving to stand beside Anira. "Convenient." "Not convenient. Necessary." Toran met Garrett's gaze directly. "You were right, human. About everything. My father has begun reforms, but many in the purity movement resist. They've branded him a traitor. They've branded me an abomination." "You expect our sympathy?" Garrett asked incredulously. "No, I expect your judgment." Toran knelt on the ground, head bowed. "I have committed crimes against your people, against her specifically. I accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate." The gesture, an Azuri ritual of absolute surrender, left Garrett momentarily speechless. Anira, however, stepped closer to the fence. "The greatest punishment," she said softly, "would be to force you to live among those you once hunted, to learn from them, to help protect them." Toran looked up, confusion evident on his face. "You would accept me here?" "Not immediately," Garrett interjected. "You'll be confined, monitored. You'll work to earn trust. One wrong move." "I understand," Toran said quickly. "I ask for nothing more than the chance to atone." After a thorough security scan confirmed Toran carried no weapons or tracking devices, they cautiously admitted him to the sanctuary. As Garrett escorted him to a secure living quarter, Anira watched them go, her expression thoughtful. Later that evening, after Toran had been settled under guard, Garrett found Anira in their quarters, gazing out at the stars. "You're too forgiving," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest. "Not forgiving. Practical. His defection validates everything we've been fighting for, and his abilities could help protect the others." "Still don't trust him? Nor should you." She turned in his arms to face him. "But this is how change happens, Garrett. One person at a time." He studied her face, the delicate blue skin, the violet eyes that had once been filled with fear, but now shone with confidence and something deeper. Something that made his heart race whenever she looked at him that way. "You've changed me too, you know," he admitted, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "For better or worse," she teased. "Definitely better." His fingers traced the curve of her cheek. "When you first came to my barn that night, I was just existing. Not living, running from my past. And now I'm running toward a future. With you." Her cool fingers found the scar on his chest, tracing it gently. "When you stepped between me and Torin's blade, that was when I knew." "Knew what?" "That I loved you." The words spoken for the first time hung in the air between them like a precious gift. Garrett's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too. Have for a while now." Their lips met in a kiss that started gently but quickly, deepened with months of shared experiences, mutual respect, and growing desire. Her skin cooled his warmed hers. Different species, different biologies, yet somehow perfectly complementary. Later, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Ira's head resting on his chest, Garrett reflected on the strange path that had led them here. From a frightened girl in a barn begging him not to lift her skirt, to a strong woman helping build a sanctuary for her people. From a man running from his past to one embracing his future. "What are you thinking about?" she murmured sleepily against his skin. "About how sometimes the things that break us are the same things that rebuild us stronger," he replied, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "And about how glad I am I found you in the barn. Even though it cost you your home, nearly your life, some prices are worth paying." He pulled her closer. "Besides, I found a better home." Outside their window, the lights of Haven's Edge glowed softly in the darkness, a beacon of hope on a world that was, slowly but surely, learning that difference wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. And at the center of it all, a human and an Azuri who had found in each other not just healing, but a love that transcended the boundaries of species, culture, and pain. It wasn't perfect. Turan's redemption would be a long road. The genetic purity movement still had supporters. There would be challenges ahead, but for tonight, in this moment, it was enough to simply be together, broken, healed, and stronger for it.